Baba Bowie.
Hello there. Don't you dare say I didn't post anything major last month. I'm still traumatized about it. Anyway, it's time to talk about Kenny Dot and the Hottie Steppies in a few minutes. First, let's talk about classic indie bands losing their identity. Help me. Belle and Sebastian, a bit of previous. I may be missing something because I'm only familiar with Belle and Sebastian's early work, but this doesn't really feel like a Belle and Sebastian album. I guess it's because of how different it is from the material I know them for. I usually don't like to make that point, but in this case, I feel like something got lost in translation and they lost part of their essence in the process. It may be because of me, since I'm only familiar with their 90s albums, but still, I was expecting to enjoy this one more. At least the positive highlights are neat. Some are similar to their old stuff, and others are good examples of this album's sound. But still, I think this album is just okay. Negative highlights, 63%. Jack Harlow, Come Home, the kids miss you.
Hey, this is actually pretty fun. This is not as bad as people are saying.
Man, this album is strange. It begins with some super enjoyable pop rap tunes, but then it dives into music that hits boring, bizarre, and even straight up bad notes. Plus, we've got some Hall of Fame bad lines in here. Where the hell to even begin? The positive highlights are actual songs that are worth saving, but for the huge majority, this record is one of the most awkward releases of 2022 so far. 41%, I guess? Florence the Machine, Dance Fever. It's really bizarre to me that even though I always adored the aesthetic of Florence the Machine, I never actually checked out any of their albums. This needs to change, and I'm starting to do so with their new entry. A record that pretty much matches my expectations for what their music would sound. Super mystical and luxurious indie pop with strong rock influences, gorgeous vocal performances, and abundant production that makes this album sound larger than life. It does have some weak spots along the way, but I'd say that's pretty much matched with my expectations. And I definitely need to check out some more of their stuff after this. These were my favorite moments of it, and the score this gets is a grandiose 82%. The Black Keys, Dropout, Boogie. The Black Keys felt like they were going through a downward spiral throughout the 2010s, with every of their releases constantly getting worse and worse. The rock bottom was reached last year with the insufferably bland Delta Cain. Just by saying that name I already feel nightmares. I was expecting them to sink even further in here, but apparently Delta Cain was indeed the rock bottom. And it's now time for the Black Keys to change the band name to the Bouncy Balls, because this album is them bouncing back after reaching rock bottom. It's not amazing, in fact it's pretty run-of-the-mill, and the only songs that are worth of checking are the positive highlights. But for the first time in forever, it feels like the band's getting a grip into making stuff worth listening once again. The negative highlights can be brought to the firing squad though. But overall, yeah, way better than what I could have predicted. 64% superb. I guess that shows how low my expectations were. 3 Days Grace, Explosions. Let's be upfront, man. 3 Days Grace was just never the same after Obongjayar left. As a person that grew up listening to them, and to this day finds them to be one of the best post-grunge acts to ever become popular. But as soon as Matt Walsh took over the vocals, my engagement for the music just went... And since then, their albums just went downhill. I was expecting the boat to sink even further with Explosions. And in a surprising turn of events, this was a step up from Outsider. It's still in the abyssal zone, but at least closer to the surface. A lot of the stereotypical 3 Days Grace tropes are here. Lyrics filled with angst, blasting pop chords, done in a pretty vapid way, but there's a few dark horses in the tracklist that manage to show that the band can still do something interesting when they try. What this means for their future, I have no idea. It can be just a strike of luck, but hopefully they get the kick out of this once again later. Just don't include anything like these and we'll be good. 47%. Harry Styles, Harry's House. I like this record, but I doubt it will occupy a very large space in my head after like 2 months. But at least I can say this record has a lot of Harry's surname. I really dug the positive highlights. I think these are some of Harry's most potent tracks, but as a whole I find this record to be pretty normal. If it was somebody else with less fame making this record, this wouldn't have been as big of a deal as it is being now. At least, I'm glad to see Harry seems to be truly invested in making music from his heart, even if the result isn't all that special. But this probably means his masterpiece may come soon enough. Who knows? Negative highlights? 70%. LMA, Heart on My Sleeve. To know whether or not you're gonna like this album, I have to ask you one simple question. That's two. Do you like the modern mainstream R&B sound? If so, then you're gonna like this. It doesn't do anything out of the box to stand out. It's a very binding numbers trap influenced R&B album, but it's well made. There's a good snap to most of the tracks, plus the production is strong, and we got some pretty fun songs in the tracklist. So if you like the sound, sure, why not go for it? It's just not a very quintessential sound though. Less than quintessential when it comes to the boilerplate negative highlights. 74% superb. Wucan, Heretic Tongues. Yeah, this thing was way better than what I could have anticipated. For the ones unaware, the sound of this band is very frantic heavy side, that at point resembles classic rock and modern stoner metal as well, with some Jethro Tull-ish flutes also joining the party. And while they usually give us some fun rides, this is easily the best of their efforts so far. And it's also the album I enjoyed the most this month. That means it's the album of the month, by the way. Super powerful energy, fantastic performances, and steady compositions are a mainstay in here. It has one very strange and rather confusing track midway, but besides that one, this thing works wonders. But if you want an album that sounds classic, but still original enough to not be a Greta Van Fleet of life, this is a great pick. Positive highlights bubbling up right before the score of 87%. The Smile, a light for attracting attention. To me, this album certainly feels like a smile, but not the one you're thinking. More like when you smile after you leave the dentist and your mouth is still full of anesthesia. In other words, I don't really feel it. Imagine this. It's like in Rainbows and the King of Limbs had a baby. And I, conveyor of super original opinions, adore In Rainbows, but I'm not very crazy about King of Limbs. So the result of the mixture to me is good, but not amazing. Overall, there are some highlights, and it works as a very atmospheric release that at points can sound really mysterious. It's just that something isn't clicking here in my ears. Which is probably a good thing, I guess. Well, 68%. Kendrick Lamar, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. I know most people will probably write these as long reviews for this album. I'll just keep it simple. I like it. It's not as good as Good Kid and T-Pab, as I was expecting, but there are some all-time great Kendrick songs in here. And it's always pleasing to see how Kendrick touches in themes he addressed in the past without feeling like a rehash. Plus adding even more layers and always keeping us engaged in what he has to say. With the layers part also making it his most personal record so far, even if there are some tracks in here that could have been cut. The hype surrounding this record made it feel like this album was about to become the dark side of the moon of hip-hop, which is totally not the case, but I don't blame Kendrick in the slightest for that. People should remember that he's still human, and not an untouchable god music-wise. The more vulnerable moments of this record tell that. And also that he's still putting his heart out in his music, while constantly impressing us. And this is all that matters. Plus I really think Mother I Sober should have been the final track of this. Well, 83%. Black Star, No Fear of Time. Black Star, the legendary duo composing of Mos Def and Talib Kweli, is back, releasing their first studio album in 24 years. An album that at the same time I was eager for, I was also worried, considering it had the worst album release of the past 2 months. Luckily, the result compensated its bad release in some aspects. Both rappers showed they're still in great shape, Mos Def especially, and the beats are often very consistent in their quality. But their flaws still come through clearly. The middle portion of the album is notably dull, and there are some aspects of its production, reminding we're talking about Madlib, that can feel pretty tiresome. Plus, that whistling. Why is that whistling so goddamn loud? Why? In the end, yeah, this was a good comeback, but notably flawed and quite inferior to the original Black Star album. It's not worth to sign to a random podcast platform just for this. Hopefully we won't have to wait another 24 years for the next album. And if God allows it, they will right their wrongs in it. These are the songs that stood out for good or bad. And the score is 75%. Ethel Cain, Preacher's Daughter. Whoever is the preacher that raised this gal, kudos for raising such talent, but dear God, I hope you rot in hell. This is one of the most intense albums I've heard this year. The storytelling of this thing is captivating to the bone. It makes you want to know every single upcoming step, and the music is gorgeous. Phoebe Bridgers, Lingui Noda, and Evermore Taylor Swift put into a blender for you to have an idea. It does have some weak points, songs that could be shorter, others that don't really leave a mark, but it is super compensated by some of the most transcending tracks that came out this year, especially during that one track where she does that yell. That caught me off guard in the best way possible. It may not be one of my absolute favorite albums of this year, but it's one of my strongest recommendations of 2022, just because of the intensity of the experience. My favorite moments were these bad boys in here, and Preacher's Daughter gets a solid 82%. Obongjayar, Some Nights I Dream of Doors. Like many people, I also discovered Obongjayar's existence thanks to Little Sim's album from last year, where he was responsible for one of the catchiest parts of the records.
One time kill, you can't stop me, oh, you can't stop me.
I was expecting some more of that goodness going to this album, and I ended up with a lot more than I bargained for. An album that, just like its album cover, is a bright, colorful, and lush psychedelic art pop release that managed to keep you engaged throughout, and shows many more sides to Obongjayar's facade. It may have a couple of underdeveloped songs in the tracklist, but at least you can say that it's even hard to pick a favorite moment in here. It's a super consistent record that feels both boundary pushing yet accessible, making it one of the most underrated albums of this year in my view. Give it a shot if you know what's good. 85% superb. Otoboke Beaver, Super Champon. This album is the closest to feeling glitter bomb music has ever made me feel. These girls come out of the box with some monstrous energy, blending in elements of punk rock with J-rock with Riot Girl, with being hit in the head with a goddamn siren that may not sound like a genre, but these girls certainly made it possible. It's one heck of a wild ride. 21 minutes of pure adrenaline that you should totally indulge in. My only warning is that this may make you feel disoriented like confusing Mr. Krabs in some tracks. It did to me in the negative highlights, but their counterparts made it seem like nothing. Dive yourself in, just be careful, because I'm pretty sure the energy this record exhales might electrocute you. And I'm already taking all sorts of precautions to avoid that from happening to me for a third time. Numbers on the boards, 83% for this album. Stöner, Totally. I didn't review Stöner's previous album, but you guys may remember I included it in my worst albums of 2021 list, for it being a genre pastiche of the worst kind. So, needless to say, I went to this new album expecting the same fate. But for the third track of luck in a row in this video, this album surpassed my expectations. Instead of being worst of the year material, now it's just fairly mild. A lot of the issues I had with their debut are still present here, lyrics, production, but now in a more manageable way. And get this, there's even some songs in here that I find to be enjoyable. It's still not very good. And there's some absolute stinkers in the tracklist as well. But it's a far cry from Stöner's rule. And it makes me start to feel hopeful the band's getting the right direction. That's the power putting a pizza in your album cover can give you. That can literally solve anything. Look, the score here is 63% by the way. Collage of the month. Collage of the month. May stop 4 are here at the Collage of the month. I created the song last year, and for some reason it never left my head, so time to use it again, I guess.